Let's begin and let's daven that the zchut of our learning should help to bring home the last couple of
True.
hostages, right? Last couple of
Yes.
hostages, and protect our soldiers and Am Yisrael and bring an end to our wars. And with that, we will begin. So this is the tour in Hilchos Shabbos, right? So the sugya that we learned is in Yoma, talking about Pikuach Nefesh, uh, but the uh, the basic din of Pikuach Nefesh finds itself placed firmly in Hilchot Shabbat, and of course it will apply then to also Yom Kippur and to the Chagim. So this is where it is in the tour, and we'll start from here. So. Michael Schwartz, why don't you start reading here? Kol pikuach nefesh.
כל פיקוח נפש דוחה שבת, והזריז הרי זה משובח, אפילו נפלא דליקה לחצר אחרת, וירא שתעבור לחצר זה, ויבוא לידי סכנה יכל לכבותה, כדי שלא תעבור, ואין הולך.
Okay, so stop there. So explain
Okay,
that.
okay, so Pekuach Nefesh is saving of a life, pushes off Shabbat, and one who is, I think zealous. I think we use the phrase is praiseworthy, even for a building that's for falling, for a fire.
Okay, so wait, afilu
Uh,
naflad leika.
in another courtyard.
Okay, so in other words, that says naflad leika. In English, you would say if a fire broke out in another building,
I thought
right?
Nafla was no.
It's not a building, right? So,
Oh,
and that so here I will interject here. So in our sugya, back in our sugya, which, wait a second. Uh, I'll just point this out. I didn't take time at the time, but since since we're here, I'll take a little bit of time and just point this out. In our sugya, yeah. Oh. All right. My screen is freezing up here. Let's do this a different way. Let's do it. Um, let's go back here. So I just want to put this a little bit in context. So if you remember, our sugya earlier on, we did a bright time that talked about this idea that we're the Chal Shabbos for Pikuch Nefesh and Hazariz. That was the Makor, right? Tanura Banan. This is from our sugya. Mefakrim Pikuch Nefesh b'Shabbat v'Hazariz harezin Shubach ve'in tzarich litol reshut mi din. And then the Braita gave us a bunch of examples, a tinok that falls into the sea and so forth. And then the last one in that Braita said, Mechabin mafsikim mipnei hadleika b'Shabbat, right? So that's what the Torah is quoting, that we put out a fire or we put up a barrier against the fire on Shabbos, v'hazariz harezim mishubach, v'ein tzarich litol reshut mibeit din, v'afal gav dekam memakich mikuche, even though you will like lay down coals, and then those coals could be used later on after Shabbat for cooking. Nonetheless, you're allowed to do that on Shabbos in order to save lives.
Are you allowed to use the calls after Shabbos?
Yeah, so that's the
Okay.
point, right? So in other words, even though that happens,
So you're allowed to bet you it's one thing it's one thing to say that it happens, another thing to say you can benefit.
it's what I didn't hear the first
I
part.
mean, so it's saying not only can that happen,
Yes,
but you can also benefit from it.
yes,
Okay.
right. That was all of these, right? So
Okay.
like the first one, the Tinook falls into the sea. You can pull him out with a net, even though you're going to capture the fish, and you can keep the fish. You don't have to throw them back, and so forth. So all of those things, even though your Chilul Shabbat will lead to some benefit from the Chilul Shabbat itself, but since you did it beheter, you did it in order to save somebody's life, then it's fine. Yeah, you're allowed to do that. So why am I bringing this up? So after this sugya uh, is when we got the statement of Shmuel, right? So at the end, right, the Gemara here says at the end of that sugya, before it goes on, it goes through each of the examples in that Braita, and the last one is Mechabinim Mafsikin Lamali. So why do I need the case of when a fire breaks out that you can either put it out or you can put up a barrier against it? Why did I need to bring that? And the answer was the fil lechatzer acheret. Even if it's going to, meaning even if it will go into another chatzer, where you might think if it's going into another chatzer, then I have time to evacuate everybody. But what if there are people in there? It's like Rashi says, if there are little children or maybe elderly people that can't be evacuated so easily, nonetheless, you're allowed to be machal Shabbos. And right after that is where the sugya that we spent the last few weeks on, which is Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Lo halchu b'pikuach nefesh achar harov. And then it brought all these examples. So what's the case of Shmuel talking about? So if you say that there's 9 Jews and one non-Jew among them, so it's Rov Yisrael, and if it's Rov Yisrael, so if I would go after the Rov, certainly I'm going to save somebody's life. So the question here is, what was the case of pikuach nefesh that involved 9 Jews and one non-Jew? So Rashi says it's talking about a case where a building fell on one of them, right? And that's the way we learned the whole sugya. But the Rif, in fact, sees it as a continuation of what came immediately before, where it was talking about a fire. And it would work equally for the fire. That is, if you saw 9 Jews and one non-Jew in a chatzer and a fire broke out, and now now you have to do something, right? You have to either put out the fire or do something to put up a barrier against the fire. So you would do that on Shabbos also, and so forth. So the Rif learns that this whole sugya talking about a fire. It doesn't matter. In other words, it's not that Rashi and the Rif disagree with each other's example. Any example of pikuach nefesh would fit the question of what Shmuel is talking about. But I'm just pointing out that they learned it differently. The Rif learned it in a sense more in context, because that was the context that we ended off with, Mechabinim Mafsikin. And Rashi learned it in terms of Mapolet. But either way, the halacha will be the same. So I'm just mentioning that as a point to be mentioned. Okay, so so now you see the tour when he's paskening our sugya. So he starts with the language of the Braita that kol pikuach nefesh toches Shabbat. He doesn't quote all of the examples yet in the Braita, but he does bring the example of the Dleka, which is the last thing in that list. And what happens if you have a fire that broke out in this chatzer and you're afraid it will go to the other chatzer? So where did he get that from? That's what the Gemara meant when it said why, when the Gemara asked, why did I need to learn the case of Machabim Mafsikim Mipnei Hadleka? I needed to learn it for the case of Chatzer Acheret. And now the Tur is explaining what is the Chatzer Acheret, meaning that you're afraid that the fire is going to go into another Chatzer. You're allowed to put it off, to put it out, Kedei Shelo Ta'abor, so that it won't pass over into the next Chatzah. Okay, Paul, why don't you read a little bit? Ve'ein holchin. Paul? Paul, are you still here? Paul, you're muted.
Didn't want to hear me coughing. ואין הולכים בו אחר הרוב, כגון 9 אוג.
Og is Ovdei Gilulim, which is another way of saying Ovdei Avodah Zarah.
זרה, אוקיי. כגון 9 אוג וישראל אחד, לא מבעיה. מה זה המילה הזאת?
Ribaya, I don't need it.
לא, מבעיה באותה חצר דפשיטה, שאם נפל שם עליהן שמפקחים תהווה לי ליה קבוע
Davale.
דבלה קבוע וכל קבוע כמחצה על מחצה דמי עלה אפילו פירש אחד מהם בחצר אחרת ונפל חשבינן לי
V'nafal alav.
איפה אני? לחצר אחרת ונפל עליו שם מפקחים כיוון שנשאר קביעות הראשון במקומו חשבינן לי כמחצה על מחצה.
Okay, so stop there. Stop there. So let's explain this. So it starts here, right? Ve'ein hochin bo achar harov.
Yeah, we saw this in the Gemara.
Yes.
In the Mishnah already.
No, this is in the Gemara. This was the statement
Gemara,
of Shmuel.
Mhm.
That Shmuel said, Lo halchu b'pikuach nefesh achar harov. So now you see the Torah is bringing this now the halacha.
Okay, he records this thing with the one Jew and 9 goyim. Yes,
Right.
yes. What is אחד lo mi? What is this word?
Lo mibaye. Right. So what is it? Kigon teisha odei gilulim Yisrael echad. So what does it mean we don't go after the rov? So for example, we have 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew. Lo mibaye.
Nine goyim and 1 Jew.
Right. 9 goyim, 1 Jew. Lo mibaye bota chatzer. We don't need it. In other words, I don't need to be told ba'ota chatzer in that same chatzer. In other words, if all of them are right now in the same courtyard. The pshita, she'im nafal sham alehen, it's obvious that if it fell on them there, shemfaklim. Why? In other words, so here,
Dig them out.
Yeah, to dig them out. So it's interesting because he also doesn't mention yet the word mapolet. But
Mm.
the language could also be applied to dleka, right? Because he uses this term, nafla dleka. So that would mean literally that the fire fell into the chatzer, but it means the fire broke out in the chatzer. And now he says, so that would be, so this applies uh, even if even when there is a rove who are not Jewish, right? And that's so in other words, he skips ahead already to the case where there are nine non-Jews and one Jew, and then a fire breaks out in a chatzer where this group of people is standing. So lo mebaye bota chatzer, I don't need to be told that if it fell out while they were all there in the same chatzer, the pshita shim nafal sham alehen shemefaklim. That if the fire broke out there, the mefaklim here, and mefaklim now is going to be figurative because we're not going to dig them out per se, but it means that I would put out the fire for them. And why don't I need to be told that case? Dahavale kavua, b'chol kavua kemechzal mechzadam. So what does that mean?
That when we have um, a group that is clearly a group, um, we rule as if they're evenly divided between Jews and non-Jews.
Okay, so we have the group that's kavua, and so it's a fixed group in a fixed place, and so I don't need to look to see if the fire is going to only affect the Jew, and maybe I can't tell at that moment. There's a fire going. I can't necessarily figure out exactly who it may harm and who might be able to escape it. Uh, but I don't need this. I don't need this din that tells me that in pikuach nefesh I don't go after a rove because this is a case of kavua. And in case of kavua, kol kavua can mechzal mechzadam. As long as I know there's even one Jew, and the example of nine non-Jews and one Jew is just an example. It could be 1,000 non-Jews and one Jew. It would be the same thing. The numbers aren't important. It just means that there's a minority of Jews and a majority of non-Jews. But since they're kavua, it's connect. I look at the entire group as if it's half and half Jewish and non-Jewish. And once it's half and half, then as we learned in the Gemara says that's safek nefashot lahakel. So when it's an even safek, when it's an even doubt, then a mekil to be mechal Shabbos to save somebody's life. So I don't need it.
What is kavua here?
So what? So what did we say? What's kavua here, Michael Schwartz?
It was um, it was known at an earlier time exactly what the situation was.
Yeah. So
Fixed group and fixed place.
yeah. So what we said is it's a fixed group. In other words, I know that there's a group of people who are in this place. So that's what makes it kavua. And what Michael Schwartz is pointing out is that in principle, right, there was a time when every person can be identified. I know that everybody has a Tudat Zahut, and I know who's the Jews and who's a non-Jew. But now that the fire is breaking out, I'm not going to say I'm going to look for the Jew among the non-Jews. But since there's a single Jew there, I treat the entire group as if it's half Jewish, half non-Jewish, which means practically that I'll be Machal Shabbos to save whomever. doesn't matter who I save. I'm going to save whomever because there's from a halachic point of view, I look at it as a 50-50 chance that the person that I'll save is a Jew. Ella, so I don't need it for that. I don't need the idea that I don't go after the rove in that case, because that's a case of kavua. So even though even if there's a vast majority of non-Jews and a minority of one Jew, I still don't need someone to tell me that I'm going to save somebody's life for that. Because there's a single Jew there, I will save people's lives because it's a case of kavua, v'kol kavua k'mechza mechza dami. But what do I need it for? Ela afilu piresh echad mehem l'chatzer acheret. I need it for the case of when that if I saw one of them leave and go into another chatzer, v'nafal lav sham, and that's where the fire broke out. Mifakhin. So even there, I'm going to go out of my way to save his life. Kevan and the Tzur says the reason is Kevan shenishar kviyut harishon bimkomo, since the original kviyut stayed in its place. In other words, the original group stayed in its place except for one of them. One of them left. So the original kviyut is there. Chashvinan le kemechza mechza. So since the original kviyut is still in place, even though one of them now left, I'm going to consider it still as a case of mechza mechza. And that tells, so that'll tell me that I still have to be, I have to still save that person's life. Michael Werner, why don't you read? Aval.
אבל אם נעקרו כולן בשעת עקירתן, הפירש אחד מהם לחצר אחרת, ונפל עליו אין מפחים. כיוון שנאגד קביעות הראשון ממקומו, אמרינן כל דפריש מרובה כפרש.
Okay, what does all that mean?
However, if they all were scattered.
No, so necru means uprooted.
Oh, if they were all uprooted, and in the moment of the uprooting, Piresh, it was.
Piresh here means from the word lifrosh, not the faresh.
Oh, they were sort of scattered. They went
not scattered, but separated.
Separated. Okay.
Piresh echad mehem.
So, and one of them was separated to another chatzer, and the building fell on him.
Okay, so we were talking about a fire.
Oh, fire, and fire broke out in the other houses.
Right. It could be either one, but
Yeah.
presumably we're talking about
Yes,
fire.
yes.
Okay.
This is like in all the 1970s disaster movies, sort of. Never mind. Yes. One does not rescue or do.
Okay, so yeah, so right, so the word mefakeh means to uncover, but we're using here. It's clear it's using in a broader sense. It means we're not going to save their life. We're not going to try to save their life on Shabbos.
Because the kiviyut, the state of being kavua, the steadiness, the groupness, the steady groupness,
But not group. Don't focus on group, but kfiyut, just
the
that
steadiness,
there's a fixedness.
the fixedness was uprooted. The initial fixedness was uprooted from its place. And that is said of everyone who is separated from the group.
Not from the group,
From the majority.
from the majority. Kol de parish,
Everyone who is separated from
Meruba kaparish. Kol de parish, Meruba kaparish. Follow my intonation. Everyone who is separated from the majority, or anyone who's separated from the majority. Okay, so again, we have it goes back to these general rules that we were talking about what is rove, what's the significance of rove, and why do we say rove, why do we say, when do we say kavua, and so forth. So just to review the concept, that there's an idea that when in cases when there's a certain reality that I can no longer determine. I can no longer determine a particular reality. So halacha has different general rules that will come to take its place, or it's come to give us a halachic reality that I'm going to work with. So we started off with this idea that I had a fixed group in a fixed place. So as long as according to the tour, as long as the original group is in place, even if one of them leaves, I will still say it's as if I still look at this as a whole group that's kavua. And so even if one of them went off to another chatzer and a fire broke out there, I'll consider them as if they were still part of the original group. And therefore I will go out of my way to try to save their life even on Shabbos. But what if the whole group moved? What if everybody left the original group? And now and then among those people, one of them went off into another chatzer. So now the Torah says, since the original kviyut, or since the group that had a din of kavua is no longer there, that broke up. They all left. So now I can't view them as a whole group to say kol kavua kameftzal meftzadami. And what do I say? I'll say one of them left, and he left a group where the majority of the people were not Jewish. So then I use this other cloud that says kol de parish, meruba kaparish. Anyone who leaves from a group, my assumption is that they were one of the majority who left. And since he was one of the majority and the majority weren't Jews, then I'm not going to be Machal Shabbos to save their life. That's how the tour learns. And I'm not going to go back now, but if you remember, I'll just say this about Peh without going back and looking. So remember, we had the statement of Shmuel, who said that we don't go after Rov when it comes to Pikuach Nefesh. And then a little later, the Gemara brought a statement in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that seemed to contradict that. And the Gemara said it's not really conflict with Shmuel, because had the parish kulhu v'had the parish miktzatayu. One of them is talking about where all of them left, and one of them is talking about where only some of them or even one of them left the group. So the way the Torah is understanding that is in the case where only one of them left the group, he'll say that would be a case of kol kavua kameftzal meftzadami, and I will save that person. But if all of them got up and left, then I don't. If all of them got up and left, I don't, because it's no longer a case of kavua. That's how the Torah learns. Let's take a look for a moment now at the Beis Yosef, and just on this part here. Okay, Michael Schwartz. I'm going to read the first part and then I'll give you to read. So, Pirtei Rimzei Dinim HaMechudashim Uvulayim B'zeh Siman. Right. So this is just a summary of what dinim we're going to learn in this siman, and it covers this question: Im yotzim chutz l'tchum l'fakeach al bat Yisrael, sherotzim goyim lahotzian me'aklal. All right, that'll be later on, so we're just going to skip that. All right, start from here. Kol pikuach nefesh.
Kol pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat v'hazriz harizeh meshubach b'perek batra de Yoma pei daled amud bet v'mashakatuv
Asher katav.
mashakatav afilu nafla delika l'chatzer acheret v'kule gam zeh baraita shem sham makvin umafsikin mipnei hadlika v'okimna de'afilu l'chatzer acheret v'firesh Rashi delika b'chatzer zeh b'nefeshot b'chatzer acheret v'hem cholim or ktanim kalamar ein shahut lahavrichem kodem she'yagia lehem ha'esh.
Nice. So can you translate all that?
So what is written is that even if a fire broke out in another courtyard, and etc. Also,
Okay,
this.
So what's he refer? I just want to make sure everyone understands. So this is the Beis Yosef. He's commenting on the Torah, and he's saying that which the Torah wrote, and he's just quoting here the Torah. He's quoting the Torah. The Torah said, "Afilu naflad leikad l'chatzer acheret," etc. So he says, "Gamze."
Also, this baraita there where you can put out the fire or make a barrier because of the fire, and we hold that even or we establish that even another courtyard, and Rashi explains that the fire in this courtyard, and there are nefeshot people in the other courtyard, in the other, and hey, they are sick or there are children. In other words, they can't wait to flee.
Would be in this case. There isn't enough time.
Okay.
Right, from the word l'shahod, right, which would mean to, let's say, to tarry or to wait and so forth. But in shahud la'avricham, there isn't enough time la'avricham to evacuate them.
To evacuate, not for them to flee, to evacuate them before the fire arrives onto them.
Okay, so yeah, so he's sort of saying we've learned the Beis Yosef before, so just to remind you, so the Beis Yosef coming after the Torah, he's his what he sees as his first task is to tell you the source or the sources for the Torah. So he's saying this is also a braita there, meaning there in Yoma, right? He said this is from. He says he started off by telling him this is from the last chapter of Yoma. He says, so this is from a braita there, meaning in Yoma, and the braita said, "Mechabim mafsikim ibnei hadleka." That was from the braita. Well, kimna, and we established that to mean dafilu chatzer acheret. In other words, the Gemara qualified that. Why did I need to learn that we put out a fire or we put a barrier up in front of a fire uh, when it breaks out on Shabbos, because it means that not only if it happens right here, but even if it's in another chatzer. And then he says, and Rashi explained, what did that mean? That there's a fire in this chatzer, but there are people in another, in other words, in the next over chatzer, and they are either sick or they're children, meaning there isn't enough time to evacuate them before the fire would get to them. So I'll be Machal Shabbos to save them. Okay, let's go on to the next part. Michael wanna run Shuri, Vein Hochi.
Okay, this one, okay. אין הולכים בו אחר הרוב וכו'.
Achar.
אחר, okay.
Okay.
גם זה שם אמר רב יוסף. אמר רב יהודה, אמר שמואל, לא הלכו בוויכוח נפש הרוב. היכדמי יומא דאיכא תשע ישראל וחד גויה ביניהם, הרוב ישראל נינהו.
Haru Yisrael Ninhu. Okay. Inami.
אינמי מחצר ספר נשות להקל
Ela.
I'm sorry, dozed off. Where am I? Oh, Ella, the Ika, Tesha Goim, Vechad Yisrael, Hanami, Apishita, Dohe,
Dehava.
Dahava le Kavua, Vechol Kavua, Ke Makse, Al Makse, Dami. לא צריכה תפריש חד מינהו, ואזל בחצר האחרת, ונפלה מהו, דתימם הכל דפרש, דפרש, מרובה, פרש, ולא מקץ, מפקחים, משמע, לנו.
Stop.
לנו.
Kamash Milan. All right. I'm going to push you to see if you can translate this. So we just did this now. So let's try it again. Right? It was basically he's bringing the wider context that the Torah was quoting, right? So the Torah said Ein Holchin Bo Harav. We don't go after Pikuach Nefesh. We don't go after the road. And basically says Gam Zeh Sham. What does that mean? Okay, Michael's out. Gam Zeh Sham. This is also there.
This is also there.
Also there meaning what? What's there? What's Sham?
Okay, I'm lost. I'm sorry.
Okay, Michael Schwartz.
In the Baraita.
It's in the bread. This is also there in the Gemara, right? This is also there in the Gemara in Yoma. And what did it say in Yoma? So then he quotes the whole Gemara. And the Gemara said, Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Lo Halchu B'Pikuach Nefesh Achar Harov. A famous, by now, for us, this is a famous statement of Shmuel, right? That Lo Halchu B'Pikuach Nefesh Achar Harov. And it continues quoting the Gemara. Hey Chitam. So how does that work? What's the case? Haruba Yisrael meaning. So if you say he's talking about a case where there are 9 Jews and 1 Goy, so there the rov is Jews. And therefore what?
Shmuel's statement clearly does not apply
Because
he says we do, because that's one case where we do go after that.
right, and it's here I would go after I would say I'll go after the rov, and the rov would tell me that I'm going to say whomever because there are nine Jews and 1 non-Jew. Inami, or else mechza mechza. Maybe it's half Jews and half non-Jews. Then what would I say? Safek nefashot lahakel. Safek nefashot lahakel would also inform me that I have to save whomever. Eldika tisha goyim v'chad Yisrael. Rather, it must be talking about a case where there are 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew. But hanami pshita dahavale kavua v'chol kavua k'mechza mechzadak. So lo tzricha. I still need Shmuel's statement in the case of when the parish chad minayu va'azil lechatzer acheret v'nafla, right, where one of them left the group and went into another chatzer, and that's where the fire broke out. Mahu tetema. What would you think? You might say kol de parish meruba parish v'lo mefakchi, since one of that person left the group, so now he's not part of the group. So he's no longer part of the group, and when he's no longer part of the group, how will I identify him? Because I can't actually identify him. Halachically, I'm going to identify him as being one of the rov, called the parish meruba parish. Right? Anybody who leaves a group, you assume that he left from the majority population of that group, and therefore the lo mefakhin. Therefore, I'm not going to try to save him. Kamash malan. So it comes to teach us. What comes to teach us what?
Shmuel's statement comes to teach us that in this case, we don't go after the rov.
Right. That's what the Gemara wanted to say. Gemara at that point wanted to say, that's why I need Shmuel. I need Shmuel for the case where one of the people left a group that was mostly non-Jews. So Kamash Malan Shmuel, that in Pikuach Nefesh, I don't go after the rov. And this general principle of Kol de Parish Meruba Parish is not going to be applied. Rather, I'm going to apply Shmuel's statement that in Pikuach Nefesh, I don't go after the rov, and therefore I will try to save this person. But then the Gemara went on to say, Ini, is that true? Is that so? V'hamaravasi amar Rabbi Yochanan, Tisha Goyim, V'chad Yisrael, B'otah Chatzer, Mifaklim, V'chatzer Acheret, Ein Mifaklim. So, what was that? We have a statement, name of Rabbi Yochanan, who said, if you have 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew, and they're all in the same chatzer, and then what? Then we'll have to fill in. And then a fire broke out, and it's endangering one of them. Then mifaklim, then I'm going to try to save that person's life. Even though what? Even though the majority are non-Jews, but that's a case, I understand, that's a case of kavua, we call kavua kametzal metzadak. But the chatzer acheret, if one of them went to another chatzer, ein mefakli. If one of them left the group and went to another chatzer, I don't have to try to. I don't save his life on Shabbat. So that seems to run counter to what we just said a moment ago. That according to Shmuel, in the case where somebody leaves the group and goes into another chatzer, I would try to save the life because pikuach nefesh, I don't go after the rov. So how can I square this statement of Rabbi Yochanan with what Shmuel said? So Gemara there says lo kasha, had the parish kulhu, had the parish mikzatai. One case is talking about where they're all left, and one case is talking about where part of them left. Now he's going to quote the Rosh. Right? The Rosh, being the Torah's father, is going to be the source for the Torah. Katav HaRosh, Perush. This is how the Rosh interpreted that Gemara. Had parishkulhu meota chatzer shahayu sham b'shata kiratan nichnas echad mehen lechatzer aferet. So had parishkulhu, all of them left that particular chatzer where they were, and then b'shata kiratan, as they were leaving, as they were going to another place, nichnas echad mehen lechatzer aferet. One of them went into a different chatzer altogether. Mapolet, right? So the Rosh is adopting the language of Mapolet, right? But in any event, his life gets endangered. Ein mefakrin, right? We don't try to save his life. Why? The kevan shakru kula ein kan Yisrael kavua. Once they all got up and left, once they all uprooted from their place, so none of them are kavua, including the Jew who was in the original group. The Cholta parish meruba parish. So now I have to use this other general rule. It says anybody who left the group, he was a member of the majority. Bahad parish mitzatahu. So what's the case where only some of them left? He says that would be a case shapiresh echad mehem l'chatzer acheret. Only one of them left the group, and he went into another chatzer. And there a mapoet fell on it. For there, in that case, mifakli. And there I am still going to be mifakech. I'm still going to try to save his life. Dekevan denisharu achirim kfuim b'mkomam. Since the rest of the group stayed in its place, then they were kavua, and they were k'mechza mechzedami, v'safek nefashot lahakel, ad kan l'shono. Right, so this is essentially this is what we saw in the tour. That's how the tour, in other words, the tour is saying, based on his father, the Rosh, that the way I understand the Gemara, where Shmuel says, but I don't go after Rov for pikuach nefesh. But I also have a statement of Rabbi Yochanan that says that if you had a group of people and in one chatzer, somebody's life was in danger, I save them, but in another chatzer, I don't save them. So how does that square with the idea that the kuach nefesh, I don't go after the rov? He says there are two different cases. Case where I don't go after the rov, that's Shmuel's case. That's the case where there were Tisha Goyim, but Chad Yisrael and one Chatzer, and then one of them left and went to another Chatzer. So I still look at the original group as being Kavua, and why don't I go after the road? Because Kol Kavua Kamechzal Mechzedami. But if the whole group got up and left, then one of them went into another Chatzer, so he's no longer part of the group, and he left the group, and he was part of the Rov. And that would be what Rabbi Yochanan meant when he said, "Had the parish mitzatayu." If one of them goes off, that would be one of them goes off after there was no longer a fixed group. Then I don't save his life. So according to it's a way of trying to reconcile the statement of Shmuel with Rabbi Yochanan. The Chaim Piresh Haran. The Ran also gives his perush. This is how the Ran understood the Rif. And again, I won't look into the Rif itself right now, but the way the Rif phrases this is not exactly the Girsana Gemara. And the Ran understands the Rif to be saying now what the Rosh after him said. Anybody know who the Rav HaMagid is? No. Rambam, when you learn the Rambam,
Sorry.
fuck up. No, it's okay. You don't have to keep apologizing, but maybe do what you did the other. Sit on a chair where you can fold your legs, and maybe that'll help you to stay awake here.
Good idea.
The Rav HaMagid was one of the earliest Perushim on the Rambam, and it's known as the Magid Mishnah. So when you open up like if you open a traditional volume of the Rambam, hold on a second. So we'll make a little room here. Hold up, if you open up a traditional Rambam and you look at the Nosei Kelim on the bits of the Rambam that the Magid Mishnah commented on, he'll be on the inside, like next to the binding, where Rashi would be in a Gemara. And we call him the Magid Mishnah because it's not clear who wrote it, so we just call him after the name of the book, which is Magid Mishnah. So that's the Rav HaMagid. So this is also how the Rav HaMagid explained the Rambam. And I think we looked at the Rambam a couple of weeks ago, but it's okay. We're just going to continue here in the Beis Yosef. And the Beis Yosef continues, even though his nusach in the Rambam doesn't really line up precisely with the way we have it here in the Gemara, mikol makom, perusho mechuvan, but nonetheless his perush, it doesn't line up with the language of the Rambam himself, is what he means. But nonetheless, his perush is mechuvan. In other words, his perush does line up properly. In other words, it is a proper understanding of the Rambam. And it fits into the way we have the girsa of the Rambam in our books, the ones that we have in our possession. Shehu kedivrei harif v'harash v'haran. Okay, so in other words, the way the Tur paskind, which was his way of understanding the Gemara, is really also the Shita of the Rif and the Rambam and the Rosh and the Ran. All of these poskim learn the Gemara the way the Tur brings down the halacha. Yesh l'Rashi zichrono livracha girsa acheret. Rashi actually had a different girsa here in our Gemara. Uperush acher b'shmuazu. So he had a different explanation of this shmua, right, of this sugya, of this learning. The Gam HaRav HaMagid katav sheyesh mefarshim shegorsim came, and the Rav HaMagid also said that there were people who, right, some of the mefarshim, some of the commentaries had a different girsa here. And he went at length to explain the way they understood this sugya. But I didn't see a reason myself to explain this at greater length. Since all three, the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam, are all standing in the same opinion, we will certainly take like that, which is we're going to take the halacha to be like that. And just to remind you, the Beis Yosef, hold on a second. What does he mean? Because the Beis Yosef says at the very beginning in his introduction to the Beis Yosef that the reason he's writing the Beis Yosef is to try to bring together all the shitot of the Rishonim that preceded him, but he made a hierarchy of poskim, and he put at the very top of this hierarchy, it's like a pyramid. The very top of the pyramid is the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam. And he says whenever there's a machloket between the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam, I'll paskin like the best out of three. So here he's saying all three of them agree, so certainly I'm going to paskin like that. So the Beis Yosef sees his work is done. So the tour is passing like the Rif, the Rosh, and the Rambam. So he doesn't go into the other ways of learning this sugya. And since everybody's tired, we're also not going to look into it any further right now. So that's the tour, and I think what we'll do now actually is let's look at we're going to skip ahead. We're going to look at the Shulchan Aruch. I'm going to read the beginning and then I'll pass it over. So the first halacha. So this is Siman Shin Chavtet in Hilchot Shabbat. It says Kol Pikuach Nefesh Docha Shabbat. V'azariz harei mishubach. Afilu nafla d'leka b'chatzer acheret v'yarei shetavor b'chatzer zu. Even if a fire broke out in this chatzer and he's afraid that it's going to pass over to this other chatzer, yavoli de sakanan, someone there will come into danger, will be endangered. Nechabin shelo tavor. We put it out so that it doesn't pass over, it doesn't continue further. So you notice this is almost word for word the way the tour started the siman. He leaves out the word. What did he leave out? Anybody notice?
Of mafsikin.
Mapsikin. He left out mapsikin. Says we put it out. So the tour says we put it out or we put up a barrier in front of it. Why might he leave out the word mapsikin?
Maybe he holds that you can't do that. You can only put it out.
Or what?
Or he simply started with the most extreme case, the most
So what's the most extreme case?
uh, putting it out.
Putting it out, and therefore what? What would
And
I?
then so therefore call the Homer it would include the barrier.
Right. That's the more likely explanation. Because actually we didn't do this. The Tosfos there also wants to know if the Gemara itself says mechabin, you can put it out. What's the chiddush of saying mafsikin? Obviously, you can prevent it by preventing it from spreading would be a lesser avera than putting it out. Putting it out is actually a malacha on Shabbos, and putting up a barrier is not necessarily a malacha at all. And Tosfos has to answer there by saying what it means is that you can put up a barrier even if it would mean carrying kelim or carrying kelim that may have maybe either kelim or kelim that have water in them in the Reshut Rabim in order to get them in place to set up a barrier. Because then it would also constitute an Yisur D'Oraita. But Shulchan Aruch here, presumably for simplicity, just says you can put it out. So if you can put it out, certainly you can put up a barrier. All right. So everybody understands this now. If you see a fire that breaks out on Shabbos and someone's and people's lives may be endangered, you can put out the fire on Shabbos. This actually happened a long time ago when I was living in Ramot. There was a kind of a little fire somehow started, it was like a little brush fire. There wasn't a lot of brush, but it was in between a couple of the houses where we lived, out in like a yard, a kind of a public yard that was mostly without vegetation, but there were a few dryish weeds, basically. Somehow it started on fire. So my neighbor wanted to put it out, and I just said, it doesn't look like it's going to spread anywhere. So I said, I'm just going to stay and watch because it wasn't a huge conflagration. I said, it's okay. And he said, no, but, in theory, it could come. And so I said, I don't think we were going to put it out in such a case. Not that I was such a great posek, but I know how fires spread to some degree. But if it had been, let's say, right next to somebody's house, even though all the houses were stone, but nonetheless, there you might say at the very least you'll put up something in front of it to keep it from spreading if you were afraid it was going to spread. Okay, that's Malacha Aleph. Let's look at Bet. So here, Michael Werner, since you made the great effort of staying up, let's see if you can. You know what? I'm gonna see if I can get in. Use this has all these little simanim in it.
I can just bleep over them.
Yeah, but you know what? I can bring this up and just have the straight text. Just a second. Dun, dun, dun. And let me make sure that this transferred. Okay, now we're in halacha bet. Ein holchin.
אין הולכים בפיקוח נפש אחר הרוב. אפילו היו
Tisha.
תשע עכו"ם וישראל אחד בחצר ופרש
Rush.
פרש אחד מהם לנפש אחרת ונפלה עליו שם מפולת מפחים. כיוון שנשאר קביעות הראשון במקומו השפנן כמחצה על מחצה. Shall I continue?
Yeah, you can
אבל
continue.
אם נעקרו כולם ופישת עקירתן פרש אחד מהם לחצר אחרת ונפל עליו אין מפחים עליו שכיוון שנעקר קביעות הראשון ממקומו אמרינן כל דפריש מרובע פריש.
Okay, so this is his psak. So can you translate that?
So we don't in determining nefesh, we don't go after the rov. Even if there were 9 goyim and one Jew in a chatzer, and one of them separated from them to another chatzer, and a mapolet fell on him there. We rescue him. We dig him out. Because the initial kiviyut remains in its place. We rescue him.
Chashvinan le kemechzal mechzal. What does chashvinan mean?
We basically count them as if it were sort of half and half.
Okay. I think I would translate that. It's not wrong. Chashvinan le. One second. Here. That's okay. Chashvinan le. From the word chashav, right? So chashav you could say is what that you said,
Only.
right? But it means we think of it
We
as
think of it as Hetzel.
right. Okay.
Um,
But if
But if everyone scattered,
does you keep saying scattered, but
and
what does it say?
uprooted.
Uprooted.
If
It's
everybody,
different.
if
It's
everybody's,
important to
yeah,
make the
yes.
difference.
If everybody was uprooted, and at the time of their uprooting, at the moment of uprooting, one of them separated from them to another chatzer, and a mapolet fell on him. We don't rescue him because uh, the initial kiviut was uprooted from its place, as it is said.
Not as it is said. Amrina means
Um,
it's Aramaic for uh anachnu omrim.
we say,
We say.
um, everyone who is separated from the majority is separated.
Okay, but
We already did this, and I just
no, yeah. Kol again, my intonation. Kol de parish, meruba parish. So try with my intonation.
everyone who is separated from the majority is separated.
Yes,
Okay.
right. You see the difference.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So again, because the Shulchan Aruch in the style of the Shulchan Aruch gives us the psak. He gives us a little bit of the reasoning because he says shekevan sheneka kviyuta rishon min komo. I'm reading Kol de Parish Miruva Parish, but he's just paskening. So this is the way the Shulchan Aruch paskins on this particular issue. Let's just see the comments here of the Mishnah Berurah. I think we call it a night. Paul, are you still with us? I know he's been in and out.
He's got a
Yeah.
nod. Okay.
Paul, do you want to read a little bit from the Mishnah Berurah?
No, it's hard for me to.
Is it too small?
I'm with you, but this one isn't with you.
Okay, so Michael Schwartz, why don't you read? So here, this is commenting on, you know what? Hold on a second. I want to go back to my other screen. When it comes to using Al HaTorah for the Meforshim on the Shulchan Aruch, it's not the easiest to use. But here I can click on the Gimel, which is the first comment of the Mishnah Berurah, and it'll show me the Mishnah Berurah on that line. Okay, so Ein Hochim V'Pikuach Nefesh Acharov, Afilu Ad Tisha Kum V'Yisrael Echad B'Chatzer, and Mishnah Berurah says here, Afilu.
Afilu v'kule, perush lo mevi
Mibai.
mibai im ba'oto chatzer shahiu ba tesha
I'm not sure if you'll know this in context because it could mean a few things. Here it means Tisha Eino Yehudi, right?
oh, okay, I hadn't seen that.
9 non-Jews.
9 non-Jews of Echad Yisrael, nafal polet b'vadai machichim dekol kavua kametza al meksa dami. Ein kan rov ein Yehudim ela afilu hayu tesha v'kule.
Right. So even in a case, Afilu Hayu Tisha Akum Yisrael Echad. Right. So certainly in the case Imbo tachat teshuyu batesha eno yudi v'chad Yisrael nafal mapod b'v'dai mepakvin. Certainly in that case, I'll be mefakech because the kol kavru connects on mefzadam. But afil hayu tisha kol Yisrael chad b'chatzer v'pirei shechad mehem b'chatzer acheret. And that brings us to the next comment of the Mishnah Berurah. Pirei shechad.
בפרש אחד, לאו דווקא
Echad.
לאו דווקא אחד, אלא אפילו פירשו רובע וכד מסיים תמה כיוון שנשאר קביעות ראשון וכולי.
Okay, so what's he saying here?
Not necessarily one, but even if the majority separated and we Demasayim, that we conclude that's concluded.
The way kid the Messiah. So as it's concluded, the
Okay,
Amma.
okay. So as is concluded, the reason since the initial kaviyut stays on the group.
It's still right. It's still in place. In other words, so the example of the Shulchan Aruch, which was the example of the Tur, and that was the example of other Rishonim that says Pirshu Miktsatayu, the Gemara said if some of them left. So the way we explained that until now is it's talking about if one of them left, but the Shabru is saying that's lav dafka. In other words, if the reasoning that is that we save that person who left the group because the original group is still in its place, it doesn't really then matter how many people left the group. It could be one, it could be many. You would still save them because of the initial kviyut is still in place. Kviyut harishon b'mkomo.
Kviyut harishon b'mkomo. אף אגב, בעלמא אמרו כל דפריש מרובה פריש, אפילו היכד הקביעות נשאר במקומו, גבי פיקוח נפש, הקהילה רחמנה דדקטיב וחי בהם, ולא שימות בהם, משמע שלא יוקל לבוא בשום עניין לידי מיתת ישראל.
Okay, so this is a lot.
Okay, so even though that we always say that all that separates is as if they came from the majority, even when there is even when the kavuaness, I don't the fixedness.
I think we all know what it means.
Yeah, the fixedness stays in its place concerning B'Kuach Nefesh. We are lenient as it says in the Torah to live by them and not to die by them, meaning that that we shouldn't that there shouldn't come to any
in any matter.
Any matter to death of a Jew, to bring the death of a Jew.
Okay, so just to clarify, Akila Rahmana means
mercy.
Hashem is lenient. No,
all right, Hashem who is the Merachem, the Hashem who is merciful. So Rahmana is used in the Gemara and in Poskim to refer to Hashem / the Torah, right? There's Akilu Rahmana, that it means that the Torah was Mekil. That the Torah was Mekil. As it says, V'chai behem v'osh behem, and that implies that we can never come to a situation that will lead to the death of a Jew. So we actually, this drasha, B'chai behem, we will get to that. We're almost there in the Gemara. So we'll talk more about it when we get to it in the Gemara. And And hold on a second. I'm going to take the next one. All right. Kol kadlu kemechza mechza, right? Kemechza v'safek nefashot lahakel. So again, let's just remind ourselves what the language here was in the Shulchan Aruch, and he said, yeah. Since this is the case, right, where there was a kviyut of 10 people, 9 non-Jews and 1 Jew, and one of them left and went to another chatzer, so we're going to save their lives because we consider that group, since the group still has kviyut, we consider it kemechza mechzer, and therefore we're going to save this person. And kemechza mechza v'safek nefashot lahakel, right, which was the language of the Gemara when it said kemechza mechza, that since safek nefashot lahakel tells me that I'm going to be mekil and save this person's life on Shabbos. Ayin be Aleph Ayin, Evan Ezer, right? That's another section of the Shulchan Aruch, right? Evan Ezer deals with family matters. Siman Dalid, Sif Lamed Dalid, the Tinok Shnimtza Be'ir Shuruba Ovdei Gilulim. Right, so he's going to now refer. This is a psak that came down in the Shulchan Aruch, based on what we saw last week, where we looked at the Mishnah in Machshirim that talked about the Tinok Mushlach, the abandoned child, and we saw there was a discussion by Rav and Shmuel, not a discussion, but that we had opinions by Rav and Shmuel about what exactly are the implications of that Mishnah. For what purpose, if I find an abandoned child in a city that's mostly Jews, or a city that's half Jews and half non-Jews, that I'm going to consider the child to be Jewish, and for what purpose do I consider them to be Jewish? And Shmuel there said, if it's that we learned it, what he meant was that he's talking about the first part of the Mishnah in a city that's mostly non-Jews, that I consider him to be non-Jewish, but implying that if it is mechzal mechzal, I'll consider him to be Jewish for the purpose of saving his life on Shabbos. Okay, so this is a din that's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, that what the tinok shnimtza be'ir shuruba ovdei gilulim. What if I find a child in a city that's mostly non-Jews? Ein mechal alav et Shabbat. Right? I'm not going to be mechal Shabbos for this child. Kevan b'chol yom v'yom poshin kulam minkom kabiyutam. Since every day all the people in that city are moving, they're leaving their places of kviyut. In other words, even though the city is in other words, because what might I say? Look, the city is mostly non-Jews, but that means there's some Jews. So why didn't I say that everybody in the city is kavua, and kol kavua is kamechsal mechzadam, and therefore it doesn't matter if most of the city is non-Jews, as long as there's even one Jew in the city. Now, I might consider that this child is a Jew. So, and we're skipping now here over a millennium of discussion on that Mishnah, but to say that we don't say that there's a kviyut there, because everybody's always moving around. So since everyone's always moving around, there isn't really a kavua group, azlina nachar harov. And therefore, in that case, I go after the majority, and the majority are non-Jews. So when I find an abandoned child, I'm going to consider him to also be non-Jewish. My battery is running low, which is a sign I have to finish up. The Rama Bahaga Paliksha, but the Rama actually, in his comment, he disagrees with the Shulchan Aruch on that. He says, no, even there you're going to save the child's life. the people in the city are considered as if they're kavua, the dam ladina dahacha, and it's similar to the din that I have here of the people in the chatzeres. And those the Rama is saying doesn't matter if the people are moving around all the time, but they're all in the city. They all in that sense they're fixed. They're a fixed group in the city the way we have a fixed group in a chatzer. And so therefore I will be mefakech alav adam. The data gra shamifsoka harama. The gra holds like the Rama, meaning that I will save an abandoned child under those circumstances. Ayin yud shin, ayin sham. Look at it there. The im nimtza b'derech, and if we find him on the road, rov ha'ovrim of de gilulim, and most of the people who pass by on the road are not Jews. According to everyone, there I go after the road, and I consider the child to be not Jewish, and I don't say his life. This idea of the derech v'rov ha'ovrim, this that's derived from. So there's a sugya that also talks about this in Ketubot, and that's where this issue of the Ovrei Derech comes in, and we're not going to go into it because I could spend the next few months on all of these topics.
I mean, it sounds intuitive though.
Intuitive is good, but not necessarily.
It doesn't really help us.
It doesn't right. It doesn't necessarily help us. And it's don't what I was going to say is don't lose what you think is intuitive, but always check it. Check to see if that's what's going on. And since my battery's on, I'm not going to finish this, but I will just say, maybe commensurate with what Michael just said now. Hold on a second. I was going to say something important, but it slipped my mind. All right. I can't remember the last thing I was going to say. Maybe by the time that's it.
Yeah, I guess his computer died. All right. All right, good night.